Hello, everybody, and welcome into the MVP show, the first edition of 2021. It is January 3rd, 2021, week 17 in the NFL. College football playoff will have a national championship coming up soon. A lot is happening. Basketball in full swing. Boys, we're continuing through 2021, even though the haters said it would never be done. It's happening, and I'm glad we're here. And even though we're not officially in a semester on campus, we're still continuing the show here on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, we said it like in the pre-show, like our meeting here. Well, now that the calendar slipped to 2021, I think there's no more problems. I think everything is perfectly fine at this point, right? So we might as well continue the show because I think that in the grand scheme of things, like when you look at everything good and everything bad that happened in 2020, I think that our show was probably, I don't know, maybe on the good side. I hope so, possibly.
I think most years it would probably be on the bad side, but this year especially, I think it goes into the good. Dan, any thoughts before we start? I'm liking the hat, by the way.
Yeah, I had to go with the hat this week, folks. There's just too much on the line to not have the hat on this week. Yeah, feels good to have a new year. Excited to do it all over again, and hopefully things will be better in the world. But hey, we'll still be here, so we are excited.
Yeah, hopefully the show is in studio later in February, but for right now, it'll be through a Zoom capacity in terms of for the month of January. We'll start with the Giants. I think, it's my last time I could probably do it, so I'm going, we're going to go this way. And, well, at the beginning of the season, I don't think many people out there thought that the Giants would be playing a meaningful game in January, in Week 17. And if you said the Giants were 5-10 in Week 17, most people would believe that it wouldn't be a meaningful game. But this strange year, or last year, most of the football season has been a strange 2020, and the Giants find themselves needing a win today against the Dallas Cowboys, 1 o'clock, and then waiting around for Sunday Night Football, waiting all day for Sunday night, and hoping that the Philadelphia Eagles defeat the Washington football team. And if that happens, the Giants would get a home playoff game with a 6-10 record, statistically the worst playoff team. Well, whoever wins the NFC East will be the worst playoff team in football history and worst NFL team to have a home playoff game. And the Giants are hoping that that's them. If things go awry today, the Giants could also finish in last place with an Eagles victory and a loss to the Dallas Cowboys, which I just find amazing. But that's the spot that the Giants find themselves in. How did we get here? I don't know. To be honest, this team has been as streaky as possible. They're on a 3-game losing streak right now, which was preceded by a 4-game winning streak, and then the season started 1-7 for the Giants. And through this, there's been, you would think, a quiet year just because of everything that's going on, but no. They haven't been ravaged by COVID too bad, but it did hit their offensive coordinator, Jason Garrett, a couple weeks ago. Hits their offensive line coach today, so it'll be the assistant offensive line coach, Ben Wilkerson, who will be coaching this unit that has been inconsistent all season long. You go back to the offensive line coach, there was, as Brennan likes to say, a fight, even though it wasn't, between
Crazy.
Yeah, but between the former offensive line coach for the Giants and Mark Colombo, and the new one in Dave, can't say the last name, and I've been working on it, still can't do it, but Dave DiGiulio is, I think, the last name, but he is out today with COVID. So there's all this swirling around, and as I mentioned, a lot of streaks. And we've argued on this show, or maybe not argued, but debated whether this Giants season is good for them in terms of if they make a playoff, if they keep winning games, because the end goal most likely may not even end in a playoff win, say they were to win today's game and then get some help. But I think it's a positive that the Giants are this close in, I think, January. Again, a game that matters. Not because, again, the Giants have a shot to win the Super Bowl. I mean, every team has a shot when they get in the playoffs, but the Giants would probably be one of the most heavily underdogged teams, playoff teams, in quite a while. But in terms of just how New York sports has been in pretty much the last couple of years, this is needed. The Giants, before this season, were 12-36 in the previous 3. This season's still a double-digit loss season, so when historians look back on it, they'll look at it as a miraculous and everything going right in terms of other teams losing if the Giants were to make the playoffs. But in that same token, A playoff win, in my opinion, shifts the culture. Joe Judge, in his first year, gets a team to the playoffs. Daniel Jones, who's had a difficult year in terms with the injury bug, with both a ankle and a hamstring injury, gets to bring a team to the playoffs in his second year in the NFL, and the defense is taking steps in the right direction. I think it is all around a positive, and I think Brennan will like this. Say the worst happens today and the Giants lose, they could still get the third pick if the Browns, Eagles, Lions, Panthers, Texans, Bengals, and Falcons all win. So if they lose, that's what I'm rooting for. Imagine that. Yeah, that many teams. So no matter how you look at this, in my opinion, the Giants, I'd be disappointed with a loss, as I've mentioned previously on this show. But the way that this season has been, and to be in this position, just looking back at it, is pretty miraculous. But now that they're here, I think most fans are expecting a win today. Dallas is -1.5. The Giants are at home. It's currently freezing rain right now where I am and close to East Rutherford, New Jersey. There was snow this morning, and around kickoff, it's supposed to be freezing rain. No matter what, even if it's cloudy, just not great conditions to play football, which I think might benefit both teams' defenses, but will benefit the Cowboys more because they have a weaker unit in terms of the defensive side of the ball. Guys, your thoughts on this Giants season, today's game, anything you want to comment? My optimism or pessimism at times, anything?
I don't know. I think that, I mean, let's talk about the Giants a little bit. I mean, can they make the playoffs? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Want to make the playoffs? Probably. I do agree with the fact that if they were to make the playoffs, I think that is a culture shift, maybe not a culture change, but I think that they're kind of moving in the correct direction as far as creating something in New York that people can see as a team that can compete in the NFC. Right now, I think this more has to do with the fact the NFC is incredibly volatile, where you don't really know who the best teams are. I mean, it's the Packers at 1, the Saints at 2, and then after that, who's the third best team in the NFC? Because you've got the Seahawks, who have the worst pass defense in NFL history. You have the Rams, who lost to the Jets. You have the Cardinals, who at this point are still fighting for a playoff spot. You have the Bucks, who either look really, really good, like when they beat the Packers, or incredibly bad. Like there's no middle ground. So I think that there is some room for the Giants to jump in there if they're able to start building something. But I think at this point, I mean, we've said it before, that I think that the team that wins the NFC East will be the most what's the word I'm looking for? They'll be least advantaged team in the playoffs. Obviously, we don't expect any team from the NFC East to win a playoff game. And the only thing that's going to happen if they make the playoffs is that their draft position moves up to the high teens. I think that right now, I think the draft, I've said it for weeks. I'll say it again. I think the draft position is a lot more important than making the playoffs at this point for any team in the NFC East. Simply because you can't expect them to go into the playoffs and be able to win a game. Looking at the draft order right now, I mean, Philadelphia is in 6th, the Giants are in 8th. Let's go into the assumption that the Cowboys, who have a better record than the Eagles, beat the Eagles, and the Giants, or no, excuse me, the Eagles lose to the Washington football team, and the no timeout. I got to get my thoughts together here.
Yes.
Let's assume the Eagles win. The Giants lose, and Giants, you mentioned the Giants will move into 4th place in the NFC East. That bumps them down to probably the 6th pick in the draft, which at that point, you're looking at guys on the defensive side of the ball, Micah Parsons, Patrick Surtain, guys who are slotted to be probably Pro Bowl guys. And I think that is more valuable than making the playoffs as a wild card team and then losing in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone back and forth on this debate in terms of what the Giants, what you should root for, I guess, as a Giant fan. And you mentioned at the top, which I think is going to sort of play to my point, the NFC. Say, just for sake of argument, the Saints and the Packers are just untouchable. Giants can't beat them. Every other team who's currently in the NFC, the Giants, in my estimation, could win on a given Sunday. They've beaten the Seahawks already with a backup quarterback. They did not play close versus Arizona, but that was with Colt McCoy. They played early on in the season. They had a drive that Jones threw an interception late, but one possession drive, and it could have been a game-winning drive for Daniel Jones against the Chicago Bears. You look at the other team vying for the NFC. It's blanking on me now. I'm having a brain fart too. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. The Giants, if a pass interference wasn't called late in that game, may have brought into overtime and beaten the Buccaneers. And I understand, I think Tampa's gotten better since that point. But my point being that if we were to look at the NFC as a whole right now and going forward, which I think was Brennan's point, how it could be wide open, and the NFC East team that maybe in this year's draft and in this year's free agency takes a huge step, could be a real player next year. I don't see why they can't be not a big player this year, but make some noise this year. I talked earlier, or maybe on our last episode, that about the culture. And I think you used a better word, Brennan. It's not a change, because a culture change would be a Super Bowl. It's a culture shift. This has shifted from pitiful, where it's still pitiful, but there's optimism there. And I know what you're saying with the draft position, but the Giants find themselves in a quasi-playoff game of, it's not, or a playoff game to get in. And this is important for a team and for the players on the team. And that's why I sort of view it as a win-win in a way. I'll be disappointed, as well as most Giants fans and obviously the players and coaching staff, if they don't win. But a game like today is important for shifting the culture. And I think getting a home playoff game, even though with diminished draft position, helps the culture. And I know what you're saying with the top pick. And if the Giants were to lose and all that I mentioned earlier would unravel, I would love the number 3 pick. But if you're looking at how it would unfold and the Giants, say, get a 9 or 10 pick, I'd rather be in the teens, or I don't think there's much of a difference. We talked on it earlier how drafts are usually top heavy, and then it's teams' evaluations in which is decided in the teens. That's my opinion, because no matter what, how you look at it, and we'll get to it later with college football talk, it's a top-heavy draft in terms of the quarterback position and offensive tackle. And then from there, it's just a mishmash. If you just look at mock drafts currently, and I know we're far out, but of where players are going to go. Who's the best receiver, Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith? Who's the best edge
John,
rusher? There's a lot of debate.
I actually want to ask you about this, because right now, with the Giants slotted at number 8, it has them taking, as I mentioned earlier, like defensive players. Michael Parsons, linebacker from Penn State, Patrick Surtain, quarterback from Ohio State. I feel like all season we've talked about how good the Giants' defense is. So why do all the mock drafts have the Giants taking defensive players?
I think because they just don't have an edge rusher. That's been the most amazing thing for this season in terms of just the X's and O's standpoint for the Giants, in my opinion, because they don't have an edge rusher. They got rid of Olivier Vernon to Cleveland a couple years ago, and their defensive line is consistent of Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Leonard Williams. Those are all run blockers, all defensive tackles that have sort of made the shift to not edge rushers, but people or defensemen who get after the quarterback in a way. And Leonard Williams is the leader in sacks, where he was billed coming out of college as a guy who can get to the quarterback from time to time, but is usually a run stopper. So the Giants definitely need an edge rusher. But my opinion, and I agree, Brennan, the defense is not the problem for this season. The Giants need another weapon, another skill player. And I understand Saquon Barkley has been hurt the entire year, and that has maybe diminished the Giants' offensive production. But you look at the receivers, Darius Slayton, after a great last season, has fallen off. Sterling Shepard is at most a number 2 receiver, and he's done fine in the number 1 role, but he is always he's going to be the second guy just because of the way he plays, more of a possession receiver than a vertical threat. Golden Tate is Sterling Shepard, but much older and just a possession receiver, not a vertical threat. And Evan Ingram, who's the Giants' Pro Bowl representative this season somehow, is... Yeah, well, we'll get to that, because it's knocked off the Packers tight ends is why Ingram's in. But Ingram has 1 touchdown in the red zone, and if you look at Giants games, he's made a couple of nice grabs, but he's accumulated yards, but in some instances that has been when the Giants are down a lot or in non-consequential matters, which is why he shouldn't have been a Pro Bowler, but that's a different issue. But if you're looking at this draft for the Giants, and that's, again, I think to my point, where you could get an edge rusher, you could get a wide receiver, and I think there'd be guys available in the teens or in the low teens and in the high teens of the same value, where if the Giants were in a different position needing stuff like a quarterback or an offensive tackle, which they do need, you would want them early on in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, I think in that 8 spot where they are right now, I mean, you look at the guys, I'm just looking at Tankathon because it's the easiest one to pull up and it's free. I mean, they have Jamar Chase going 6 to the Eagles and Devonta Smith going 7 to the Lions. And then right after that, Patrick Surtain going to the Giants. So they're in play for like the best wide receivers in the draft. I mean, Jalen Waddle doesn't go until 14 to the Patriots, and then you have Rashad Bateman from Minnesota going 18. So they're in play for wide receivers. And I guess I just don't understand why a lot of mock drafts are focusing on the defense, because that's really the one thing I think that has kept the Giants in this season and helped them win a lot of the games that they have won. I guess it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Dan, any thoughts on pretty much anything we've discussed?
Well, culture matters. Definitely matters. So if today is going to change the culture for the Giants, then that's great. And if they're going to make the playoffs and people believe that will make them better, then that's what matters. If they're getting better, then I think that's what you have to look at. You know, obviously not really a Super Bowl contender this year, we think, but that's okay. You know, as long as they're getting better. If they're not entering no man's land where they're one of those irrelevant teams that just don't make the playoffs and don't get a good draft pick. That's not what you want, obviously. I think as long as the Giants can take this year and build off of it, and if a playoff berth will do that, then, I don't think that's a bad thing for them at all.
So there you go. Giants, again, as I mentioned, versus the Cowboys, 1 p.m. today on Fox. Cowboys are -1.5. Pretty much, I would say a pick 'em just because of the circumstances. Dallas this season defeated the Giants 37-34. It felt like a long time ago. It was the game in which Dak Prescott got injured in the third quarter. Andy Dalton would come into the game and lead a game-winning drive. The Giants defense at that point, I think, were a different unit than the one you see today, especially in terms of the makeup of the secondary. In that game also, the Giants were without Sterling Shepard, and Wayne Gallman only had 5 carries because at that point, he was the backup to Devontae Freeman, who at the time the Giants had just signed from free agency. So again, that game 1 p.m. and the Giants need a win and then have to wait around till 8 o'clock and hope the Washington football team, pretty much the team of 2020 in a lot of ways, loses against the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, so now we'll shift to college football, and I'm really excited for this segment for various reasons. We'll get to why I'm most excited, I guess, later, but we're going to break down really the only 2 games that matter. I know there's been a lot of bowl games and a lot of college football recently, but the college football playoff is what is the headliner. On New Year's, 2 big games. You had Alabama versus Notre Dame in the Rose Bowl, but it was in Texas, and then the Sugar Bowl between Clemson and Ohio State. We'll start with Bama and Notre Dame. It was a 31-14 win for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Notre Dame covered the 19-point spread. Good teams win, great teams cover. Remember that. But Notre Dame was outclassed in this game. There was really after the first quarter, you felt, even though the game in terms of score wasn't out of hand, that just the way the game was going, that's what the end result was going to be. Mac Jones, another great game to help his Heisman candidacy, as well as Devontae Smith. Mac Jones, 297 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Smith with 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now to Ohio State Clemson. Sugar Bowl game. It was eventful. It had Twitter buzzing because it was, pretty much the closest to a college football game that means the most for the NFL. Fields versus Lawrence. And Justin Fields had probably his best day, I would say, as a collegiate athlete. 6 touchdowns through the air, 385 yards. A great game. Trey Sermon, 31 rushes, 193 yards, and a touchdown. Iowa State had 35 points at halftime and scored on 5 consecutive drives. And it was the first time a team has done that in 5 consecutive drives with a touchdown since West Virginia in 2012 against Clemson, coached by Dabo Swinney. An interesting stat, I believe. And in terms of Trevor Lawrence's performance, he played well. I think if you looked at if Fields wasn't involved in this game, it would be a star effort for Lawrence, 33-48 in terms of completion percentage, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Travis Etienne was nowhere to be found, only 31 total yards in the game for him. And I think the 2 takeaways, and I know Brennan is going to have fun with one, but the 2 takeaways in this game, in both of these games, for the Ohio State Clemson one, it's everyone has shifted their thoughts in the Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence debate, it seems, on Twitter after one game, which in my opinion is ridiculous. And then the next point is, does Notre Dame deserve another shot at the college football playoff? Because throughout this decade, or I should say last decade, they have disappointed in the big spot. We'll start with Fields and Lawrence. I've never been sold, and I said this just because you never know. It's not a knock on Lawrence at all, but everyone says he's this can't-miss talent, and I can't debate with that. I just won't call him that because I've been burnt in the past with believing that certain quarterbacks in college were better than they panned out to be in the pros. In all the metrics and stats and just how you look at Trevor Lawrence, he looks like a can't-miss guy. The build, the throw, the hair, the mustache. No, I'm kidding. But in terms of just his on-the-field play, Lawrence has been phenomenal throughout his Clemson tenure, and the team would be lucky to have it. This season, Justin Fields, on the other hand, has had a shaky season. It's been limited games because the Big Ten started later, but Justin Fields looked average in the Big Ten championship against Northwestern. But in this game against Clemson, he looked all worldly. He looked like he should be the Heisman Trophy winner. Great deep balls all day, making the right reads, and is a rushing threat more so than Lawrence in this game. You look at it, should it change your opinion? I don't think so. I think people put too much, and it's fun to do. It's human nature to put too much real estate into one game, especially at college when evaluating for the pros, because this is when everyone got to see him. No matter who you are, if you're an average fan, you might have watched every Ohio State game and every Clemson game, but you're in the minority if you have. Everyone in the college football world and in the sports world watched that game. And what they saw was a Trevor Lawrence who had to play from behind and had to overextend himself even though the stats were there, and a Justin Fields who dominated even though he got injured in the game and then came back. So the story and who you might want if you're
right?
Yeah, and who you want on an NFL franchise is Fields. If you are just watching that game individually, should it carry out to the draft? No, and I'm sure with the combine and just the over evaluation of these players, I think Lawrence will still be first taken. But I'll ask you, and I think I know Brennan's answer, but both of you guys, did this shift your opinion in the Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Fields debate? Even if you still think Lawrence is better, did Fields maybe surprise you?
No, I mean, you can't look at one game. You can't look at one game and say this guy's going to be better simply because his team won a game against the other guy. Like, football is a sport where every single person has to do their job every single play, and if one person doesn't, then the play blows up. Just because a team doesn't do that just because one team doesn't do that better than another team doesn't mean that one individual player is worse than another individual player. I think when you look at everything that has gone down this season, which you have to, you can't only look at one game and judge these players. But when you look at everything that's gone on this season, I still think Trevor Lawrence is the better quarterback. I think he fits a lot of NFL molds better than Justin Fields does. And I think that, you can't really be sure because no one expected Baker Mayfield to go number one in 2016. But I still think that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the first overall pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars, regardless of what Justin Fields does in the national championship game and what he did against Clemson. I don't think that these games have that big of an impact in the grand scheme of things as far as when NFL teams are going to draft, because they've been watching these guys all year. I mean, we knew that this isn't a situation where we see like Joe Burrow emerge as a senior, where no one had him getting drafted before the season started, and then all of a sudden he's going to be the presumptive number one overall pick. We knew that these two guys were going to be the first two quarterbacks off the board. We knew that they were going to be two of the best players in college football this season, and because of that, these NFL teams have been watching them all season long. They know what their stats are. They know how they perform in normal games. And I think that plays a bigger impact than one college football playoff semifinal game where Trevor Lawrence threw for 400 yards and 3 total touchdowns. Like, that's a good performance. Come on. Don't do this because of one game.
It kind of reminds me of a few weeks ago when the Jets won their first game. I forget where I saw this headline, but people were like, maybe they should keep Gase. He won a game. Have you seen the rest of the season? I would say that my opinion didn't really change. I think they're both great quarterbacks. And I know from what I've been told, what do I know? Trevor Lawrence is better and that he should go number one. And I believe that. So it didn't really, change my opinion as drastically as most people felt after this game. I'd have to agree with that too.
It'll be interesting to see because Clemson didn't finish with a national championship this year. If a part of Trevor Lawrence wants to return to school, he is engaged, so maybe that factors into a decision to go pro. Not sure. Of course, people look into way too much stuff in terms of evaluating whether he'll come out or not. If you just look at a pure team standpoint, I don't think Jacksonville and the New York Jets are high on most people's teams that they want to go play for, but that's how the draft has unfolded for the top 2 picks. And the Jets have lost that.
You know who else isn't going to win a national championship this year? Justin Fields.
Wow.
Who's not going to get drafted for top 2 overall? Mac Jones. Wow. Doesn't matter.
Wow. So now we'll shift then. Brennan's going to have the same, I think, fire with this next point. You'll go back to the Rose Bowl, Alabama versus Notre Dame, and Brennan was very distraught. I wouldn't even say distraught, but he was. When the college football playoff were revealed on our last episode on December 20th, the rankings, and it was Notre Dame slotted in as number 4 instead of Texas A&M. And Notre Dame did not play well against Alabama. I did mention at the top of this segment that they did cover the spread. 17 was how much they lost by. Spread was 19.5. And you look at this game, Ian Book, who's had a great Notre Dame career and will go down as one of the best quarterbacks in Notre Dame history, was contained by Alabama's defense, and Alabama's offense, unlike recent championship teams, will be a team that scores a lot of points on you. And they did early on in this game. It was 14-0 in the first quarter, and at that moment, you felt that the game was pretty much over. Notre Dame could come back, but it was highly unlikely, and Alabama, again, showed why they're the number 1 team year in and year out, and a lot of people throughout the college football world, again, miffed that Notre Dame got a championship opportunity when other teams haven't in recent years and did not play well. Most recently in the ACC championship, Notre Dame, because they haven't been in a conference for most of the decades, but COVID put them in the ACC just so they could play a season, they did not show up in that game. You go back a couple years ago in the college football playoff against Alabama, they lost 31-3. And then if you go back to 2012 in the national championship game, pretty much the only blowout championship game of the decade, Alabama and A.J. McCarron rolled Matt Diateo and Notre Dame 42-14. So my question to you guys is, and I know where Brennan's going to stand on this, or at least
Diateo?
Yeah. Oh, geez, that's wow. Going after Matt Diateo's imaginary girlfriend.
Sorry.
Great NFL career, always will be defined by that moment, unfortunately. But my question for you guys is in terms of, do you think Notre Dame will be put in say the same thing were to happen next year, which is bound to happen because it feels like every year. Notre Dame does the same thing next regular season. Do you put them in as a college football in the college football playoffs, Abby? But year in and year out, they have disappointed in the national stage and have shown they aren't to the strengths of Bama or Clemson or Ohio State.
All right. Here we go.
Uh-oh.
John, I think I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to be honest.
Uh-oh.
I know. So you look at the top 3 teams in the college football playoff this year.
Yeah.
You got Alabama, undisputed number 1. 62 votes out of 62 votes in the AP poll. Clemson, one of the best teams in college football. Yes, they lost to Notre Dame, but they were playing without a guy who's going to go number 1 overall. Ohio State. Did they only play 6 games? Yes. Did they win all of those games? Yes. Did they prove that they deserved to be there yesterday with a win over, or not yesterday, 2 days ago with a win over Clemson? Yes, they did. Notre Dame, did they deserve to be in? No. Texas A&M, did they probably deserve to be in? Yes. Would Texas A&M have also gotten blown out by Alabama? Absolutely. There is not a team in the country who deserved that number 4 spot. Wow. I'm going to say that right here, right now. Every single team that was contending for the 4th spot, whether it be Cincinnati, lost to Georgia. Texas A&M had trouble with North Carolina, who was missing their top 3 all-purpose yard getters due to opt-outs for the upcoming NFL draft. And then who else? Obviously Notre Dame, who lost, who got blown out by Alabama. There was not a team in the country that deserved that number 4 spot, except for maybe the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, strictly because I like saying Chanticleers. But at this point, who is the 4th best team in college football? There is none. There is no team right now that can compete with Alabama, Clemson, or Ohio State. And because we only allow 4 spots in the college football playoff, and it will continue to be that way, nobody knows why it'll continue to be that way until we expand the college football playoff. There will not be a team who comes from that 4 spot who is able to compete with the top 3 teams in the country, and it has any chance at winning the national championship. There are those 3 teams, and then there's everyone else. Notre Dame happens to be the best of everyone else, so they continue to be put in the spotlight in the college football playoff, where they eventually lose that game because they're not to the class of the top 3. I feel bad for Notre Dame. I do, because they go and they make themselves contenders when they're really not contenders in the grand scheme of things. And because of that, they continue to lose to the top tier teams, and it just gives them a bad record overall, makes them look bad when they get premier playoff games, when they get premier bowl games. And I just feel bad for them at this point, because they compete, but they don't really have the talent to be able to compete with the top 3.
Yeah,
that's it.
I have to agree. When I saw that this first game was Alabama Notre Dame, I don't know. I don't really follow college football as closely as you guys do, but I was in my local grocery store, and I saw that game was on. I was like, all right, you know what? I'll make it in time for the second half. So I go home. I use my nacho cheese to make some amazing microwave nachos. And then I turn it on, and the score is what, like 21-7 at halftime? Yeah, it was 21-7 at the half. It's the same story every year with Alabama in the first round, which kind of, I understand why people want to expand the college football playoff. And if they want to do it, they should do it. But for myself, and I don't know who else feels this way, will there ever be more than 1 or 2 teams that we think will ever win the championship? Honestly, we can expand it, and that's great, but I don't know if it's going to change Clemson and Alabama actually winning it. Notre Dame's on the outside looking in, and like you guys said, it's been that way for a while.
In terms of looking at the rankings in terms of the college football playoff and wanting expansion, it's interesting because Brennan has created by himself, by the way, this is not a team effort, his
for
own
no reason, really,
yes.
other than the fact that I was just incredibly bored yesterday.
His own college football playoff ranking pretty much for how the bowl games have shifted out. Newsflash, or I guess spoiler, he did not have Ohio State at 11 before the game like Dabo Swinney did. So they were not seeing eye to eye on that, and I guess Brennan was more right on that stance. But Brennan, I want you to take us through this ranking, because I'm just looking at it, and there's certain things I agree with, certain things I don't. Obviously, it's been a result of the bowl games. So I would guess you have Iowa State at 6 because they won their bowl game.
Yes.
And if you want to take it, it's interesting, and I might have a couple questions on it, and I wish we had a graphic for it, and we're going to try our best to walk it through. But to complete this college football segment, Brennan's ranking as things currently stand in college football.
Yeah, so this is post all the bowl games yesterday. I did this after the A&M North Carolina game. Number 1, obviously, is going to be Alabama. So I have a friend at home. His name's Ty, and he is a better athlete than any of my other friends. He is he's a JUCO baseball player looking to transfer to Division I. He was a starting running back on our football team in high school, and he played in the basketball team as well. We call him First Gear Ty because he has to be in first gear for any of the rest of us to be able to compete with him athletically. That's what Alabama is to the college football playoff. Wow. First gear Alabama, because we saw it in their playoff game against Notre Dame. They are so much better than any other team in college football right now. And with that being said, they're going to throttle Ohio State in the national championship game. It's a national championship game. The over-under opened at 76, the highest ever for a national championship game. And the spread is it opened at 8. It's moved to 7 at this point. So Alabama is getting a touchdown against the second best team in the country. They are number 1 at 12-0. They will win the national championship, and Devonta Smith will win the Heisman Trophy. Number 2 going to be Ohio State. They're going to lose to Alabama, but still they beat Clemson, who was the number 3 team. As I mentioned earlier, top tier of teams. Ohio State is 2. Clemson is going to be 3. Clemson, I said it before, I'll say it again. 3 teams that are a lot better than everyone else in the country, and that is why Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson are number 3. Coming in at 4, I am going to put Texas A&M. They did win yesterday. I did mention that they lost, or North Carolina was able to compete with them without their top 3 all-purpose yard getters. But at the same time, Texas A&M did win that game. So I'm going to put them in the final at number 4. Number 5, Oklahoma. Oklahoma won the Big 12. They do have 2 losses. But I think that they're a team that is talented and is a team that could have competed had they been in the college football playoff. Number 6, Iowa State. I originally had Oklahoma and Iowa State flipped, but then I remembered that Oklahoma beat them in the Big 12 championship, so I flipped them back. Oklahoma at 5, Iowa State at 6. They had a great bowl win yesterday, and Iowa State may be a program that teams have to reckon with, not just in the Big 12, but nationally for a lot of years. Notre Dame, I have them dropping down to 7. They shouldn't have been 4. They lost big to Alabama. Big, not by a score, but in how the game felt. So I have them dropping down to 7. 8 is Georgia. Georgia beat an undefeated Cincinnati team that a lot of people were saying deserved to be in the college football playoff. It was a close game. It was an all-time worst game as far as jerseys went in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. There was just no consistency anywhere on the field. What was it? Cincinnati was wearing all red with black helmets. Georgia was wearing black jerseys, gray pants with red helmets. Like, if you're going to do opposites, at least make Georgia wear black pants too. So it's like complete contrast. But they decided not to do that. Georgia beat Cincinnati, who was undefeated, moved them up to 8. Northwestern, they had a nice bowl win. I forget who did they beat. Northwestern beat Auburn, an SEC team in the Citrus Bowl. Good win for them. They move up to 9. Cincinnati with a loss drops down to 10. I think that just kind of makes sense. They're still a team that was undefeated up until their loss to a Georgia team that I have in the top 10. So I have Cincinnati dropping down to 10. BYU with a big bowl win in their independent bowl. They move up to 11. Indiana lost yesterday to Ole Miss. That was a big loss for not just Indiana, but for the Big Ten as well. If the Big Ten wants to say they can compete with the SEC, you got to win games that you're favored in. Indiana did not do that. I have them moving down to 12. North Carolina, I actually have moving up a spot in my rankings. This has nothing to do with the fact that North Carolina lost yesterday. It has to do with the fact that a lot of other teams lost that I think should be a lot further down in the poll. And North Carolina was able to compete with a team in Texas A&M that I think is in the top 4. So I have North Carolina at 13. Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, baby. They won their bowl game. I have them up at 14 at 10-1. Their only loss this season coming to Coastal Carolina, who ended up losing their bowl game. So I have Louisiana up above Coastal Carolina at this point. Iowa, they didn't play this week. They're a Big Ten team. They proved that they're a very good team. I couldn't really move them just because they didn't lose, so they have them staying at 15. Coastal Carolina lost their bowl game, ruined their perfect season. Would have loved to see Coastal Carolina win and then claim a national championship like UCF did. Unfortunately, will not happen. I have Texas right behind Coastal Carolina. They won their bowl game. A good win. Horns down, though. I don't like the Texas Longhorns. 18, a team that the college football playoff had at 7 in their poll. I have at 18, the Florida Gators. They're a trash organization. They got absolutely smoked by the Oklahoma Sooners in the first real big bowl game this year. It was terrible to watch. Kyle Pitts is going to be a top 10 draft pick, but he's the only good player on that team. I'm sorry, Kyle Trask, but when you throw 3 picks in the first quarter of a game that actually means something, that does not bode well for you. So Florida at 18, USC at 19. They didn't play. Can't really move them at all. Liberty at number 20.
Brennan,
Syracuse.
this is where I want to step in. How is Liberty ranked? This is where I want to step in. How is Liberty lower than Coastal Carolina if they beat them in the bowl game and Liberty's only losses to an ACC team?
Because I think that it took Liberty a while to be able to get into the poll in general, and they're playing as an independent, so they're not really playing a lot of great teams. Well, I think that Coastal Carolina, even though they're not independent, they're still in the Sun Belt. Going into this week, I think that Coastal Carolina had a little bit of a stronger strength of schedule. I get that these two teams lost, but Liberty was out of the poll, and to have them jump up as much as they would have needed to pass Coastal Carolina, I think was a little bit of a stretch.
Wow. Okay. 2 wins versus ACC teams, but okay, keep going. Finish it off.
Liberty at 20. Oklahoma State, I have at 21. They won. They were just outside of the AP poll. They were pretty much number 26, right behind Oregon. They beat number 18 Miami in the Cheez-It Bowl, which is my favorite bowl exclusively because I love Cheez-Its. They're my go-to snack. And to see someone get dumped on by a giant thing of Cheez-Its instead of the Gatorade at the end of the game was one of my highlights of bowl season. So I have Oklahoma State 21. Ball State, I have them at 22. This is another one where I initially had 2 teams flipped, but then I remembered the head-to-head matchups and flipped them back. Ball State at 22. They just beat Buffalo in the MAC Conference Championship, and they are a team that I think, while I know they're not a Power 5 conference, I think that they're a team that needs to be reckoned with. They beat undefeated San Jose State in the Offerpad Arizona Bowl, and pretty handily too, 34-13. So San Jose State drops out of the rankings with a loss. to a Ball State team that was getting votes in the AP poll, but was not ranked yet. Number 23, Miami of Florida. I know. You were thinking it was going to be Miami of Ohio, but no, it is not. Miami of Florida lost to Oklahoma State in the Cheez-It Bowl, as I mentioned earlier. They dropped from 18 to 23. Buffalo, they ended up winning their bowl game, even though they did not win the MAC Conference Championship. I think that they have an all-star running back in Jarrett Patterson, arguably one of the best running backs in college football. I have them at 24. And then at 25, I have a team with a 500 record. Ole Miss. SEC, I hate the SEC, but I felt like I needed to include one of those SEC teams that ended up winning yesterday when they weren't supposed to into the poll, and I think Ole Miss is the best of them. They beat Indiana, a team that at this point I had in the top 10. And I think I get it that Indiana wasn't playing with their starting quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., who was out for the last 2 weeks, but I think that Ole Miss proved that they're a team that, while they might not be able to compete in the SEC, can compete in the grand scheme of things with a win over a Big Ten team, the number 2 team in the Big Ten this year in Indiana. So that's my top 25. I'm going to stop talking. If you guys have any comments or concerns or questions, go ahead. But that was my nerd out moment of the week where I was just super bored and decided that I was going to keep track of every single bowl game that was played. Not just the bowl games that were played, the bowl games that weren't played either. Because in my doc, I literally have Iowa was slated for the TransPerfect Music City Bowl, did not play. They were supposed to play Missouri. And then I have the bowl games that weren't played either. So like the Mercari Texas Bowl, Redbox Bowl, Hawaii Bowl, Bahamas Bowl, yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to shut up because my voice hurts.
It's okay. Pinstripe Bowl is the only bowl that didn't happen that matters, but that's besides the point. Dan, any thoughts before we shift into our MVP of the week?
I thought calling Florida a trash organization was hilarious.
After playing Bama the closest, by the way. Just completely just demolishes them after a bad bowl performance.
Who cares? They would have won with Tim Tebow.
All right, so now I don't know how to transition, but we'll shift into our MVP of the week, and then the rest of the way, NFL before Week 17. I think I have an interesting MVP of the week. I'm interested to see yours. We don't talk about it pre-show, and it could be anything from entertainment, pop culture, sports, news, anything on our minds, and it's someone or something that we thought had a great week. I'm going to go with I don't even know if everyone's favorite anymore, but he's my favorite, and that's Ryan Seacrest and his job doing the New Year's Eve show. Dick Clark's Rockin' Eve with Ryan Seacrest, and look, he's the only professional on New Year's. I'm sorry. This is maybe slander to everybody else. He is. He talks at the American people in a smart and sophisticated way, and you watch any other show or even the people on his show, and it makes America dumber, in my opinion. All these shows are garbage, pretty much, and this is Seacrest show. I mean, by pretty much, like, this is the NFC East, pretty much, New Year's show. And Seacrest and Dick Clark's Rockin' Eve, ABC is the best show. But all these networks, and I understand the effort to. You want to be on this night. It's a huge night. People, need to look at a screen to count down because, we don't have watches anymore, I guess. But it is the worst of music pretty much for the year. Let's take the worst artists and have them pre-record stuff, which makes no sense. Let's watch MTV if we want to do that, right? And they pick the worst artists too. And I understand with this year with COVID, it's a little different. But even when it's live, and there were some live performances, they're awful. And the hosts are garbage. We have to pretend each year that Anderson Cooper is a journalist for 364 days, and then with Andy Cohen on New Year's Eve, he could take shots. We can't let this happen as an American people. What are we doing? Ryan Seacrest is the only one who remains a professional. All this nonsense is going on around him, but ABC knows at a drop of a hat if J-Lo's wardrobe malfunctions or Cyndi Lauper has to make a wardrobe change, and which are both things that happened, by the way. They could just cut to Seacrest and he could talk into a camera for 10 minutes and eloquently say something about this year or about something else. I think he's underrated, and each year he is the MVP of one of the worst TV nights of the year, which is December 31st, heading into New Year's. So Ryan Seacrest, the man, the myth, the legend, is my MVP of the week.
Yeah, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Man, I think that my runner-up this week has to be Chad Ochocinco because for no reason at all, he's become a Bills fan. He's suddenly hanging out in Buffalo, and I was going to make a comment on New Year's Eve. It's not as great as that was defending Seacrest. I saw what Anderson Cooper was talking about doing drugs at some point. I was like, what is going on this network? It's true though. Like, if you leave ABC, you're like, I wonder what Fox is doing. And they're talking about that. And then you just go back to ABC. It's really dangerous. But anyway, I think my MVP this week has to be, for no political reasons, the state of New York, because they have, I think, hopefully, responsibly, and safely decided to have some fans at the Bills playoff game. They are going to have 2,700 fans, contact tracing, no tailgating, unfortunately, for the Bills fans. But I think that's smart. I think it's responsible. And as long as they can keep everybody safe, I think it's a no-brainer. So the state of New York, thank you.
Can't wait to see tables and people going through them in this no tailgating rule. But yeah.
Absolutely. I love that pick, man. People around here were incredibly excited. And I think tickets at this point are up over $2,000 already just for like a ticket to get into the game. So unfortunately, I don't have that money. I won't be attending. Okay. My MVP of the week is going to be simply because my life has been consumed by college football bowl games over the last few days. It's the Duke's Mayo Bowl. What a disgusting name for a bowl, but what a great time the two teams had playing in it. Wisconsin won, and then when they won in the locker room, celebrating the game afterwards, they broke the trophy. The top of the trophy just kind of fell off, and it's glass, so when it hit the ground, it just shattered all over the place. So then Wisconsin went and took a plastic container of Duke's Mayo and athletic taped it to the top of the trophy. So now the trophy for the Duke's Mayo Bowl and the victors in the Wisconsin Badgers is literally just Duke's Mayo athletic taped on top of like the pedestal that the trophy was originally on. So my MVP is the Duke's Mayo Bowl for being one of the most disgusting names, but one of the best results of a bowl game this week.
I think I unfortunately missed that. I'm sure great contest in college football, but those are MVPs of the week. First MVPs for the year of 2021. Now, before we go into our NFL picks, and there's a lot in terms of the standings of who's going to win our pick segment, which ends today, and so does the NFL regular season week 17. Brennan, do you have actives, inactives around the league? This week, maybe it matters less than most just because of, it's usually a fantasy football segment, I would say, and changing your lineups. For most people, their seasons are over. But if you still have, a fantasy football championship going on, or, just worried about players on your favorite team, Brennan's going to give it to you, actives and inactives for NFL Week 17.
For the early games, Matthew Stafford will play for the Detroit Lions. He did not finish out the game last week for Detroit. He will play. Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram both active for the Ravens this week in the backfield. And then Ronald Jones, another running back, he will be active as well. And Devontae Parker for the Dolphins wide receiving core will play. Inactive, Jakeem Grant will not play for the Raiders. LaShawn McCoy, another running back, not going to be active. Dad, unfortunately for you, Trey White will not play for the Buffalo Bills this week. I'm sad, but, sitting out. You're in the playoffs, so you're good. Jerry Hughes not going to play as well, and neither will, hopefully, future Pro Bowler Yannick Ngakoue to give the Vikings a worse draft pick this year because they traded him away. So he will not play either. That's just it for the early games this week.
So those are NFL actives, inactives, week 17. And now we'll shift into the game picks. And very interesting because sort of cut the deficit. So it's anyone's ball game in terms of who will win our pick segment for the year. Currently, it's Brennan with 168 points, Dan with 165, and myself with 160. We pick all the games, but we slot a game of the week, lock, and upset, and those are worth 2, while the rest of the games are worth 1. We will start with our game of the week, and there was a lot of games to pick. I mean, the game of the week for me is obviously the Giants, but more so Washington versus Philly on Sunday Night Football. But I felt just because this is for a playoff spot and for a, the team that loses has a tough shot of making the playoffs. So it sort of is an elimination game, and the team that wins moves on. And that's Cardinals versus Rams. 425 CBS. Interesting note, Tony Romo, due to COVID protocols, will not be on the call, so it will be Jim Nantz and Boomer Esiason. But it's Cardinals-Rams, Arizona's -3, and I'll start because it's also my lock for reasons of trying to get back into, or trying to win, I should say, this pick segment, so making it a 4-point play. But I'm picking the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams have not impressed me. The Rams lost to the New York Jets, and now they find themselves in a spot where they need a win to get into the postseason. If not, they need a lot of help. So they had their destiny. They are a good team. We always hear Sean McVay, great coaching wizard, and this defense is great. And Jared Goff, even though he's not a worldly talent, is a great game manager, and the play-action game works. The last couple weeks, Rams have not looked great. Cardinals haven't been world beaters either, but they, I think, are better than the Rams. This is a game that matters for both teams, and I think in the battle of these young minds of Cliff Kingsbury and Sean McVay, Kingsbury will come out on top. Arizona will get a playoff berth, and they are my lock and game of the week pick. Brennan, Cardinals versus Rams.
Let's take a look. Cardinals versus Rams. I like the Cardinals. I do. I think that it's going to be interesting to see possibly two backup quarterbacks go against one another. And I think that when you look at that scenario, I think that the Cardinals' backup quarterback is better. He won a championship in the Canadian Football League last year, and he plays very similarly to Kyler Murray anyway, where he's a threat on the ground, but maybe not as solid with the arm. So I think the Cardinals are going to be able to take this one. I think that it makes it really interesting going forward as far as playoff scenarios. Because the Cardinals right now are in third place in the NFC West. But I do think they're going to be able to come away with a win.
Yeah, I mean, take the Cardinals, people. The Rams are not very good. That's why I took the Cardinals. I mean, all year the Cardinals have consistently played better against good teams. Jared Goff's been playing. We know that, but like we said, two backup quarterbacks. Yeah, don't take the Rams. They're not very good.
So those are our game of the week picks. Again, Cardinals versus Rams. I think the game that means the most in NFL Week 17 in terms of playoff scenarios. Now we'll go into our locks, and this is a tough week in my opinion to pick them because there's some teams that aren't playing their starters, and there's other teams where they not want to lose, but if they lose, it helps their draft position, but they're not necessarily tanking. So it's definitely a tough week, but for my lock, as I mentioned, it's the Cardinals, so we can skip by that. Our records for locks are strong suit this year. I'm 10-6, Dan is 8-8, and Brennan top of the pack, 11-5 in locks. Brennan, who's your lock for NFL Week 17?
I picked him last week. I'm going to pick him again. The Green Bay Packers. You're playing the Bears, and nothing makes Packers fans more happy than seeing the Bears have a chance. Reach up, try and get that playoff spot, and then Aaron Rodgers just taking out a 1911 and popping a finger off so that they can't get there. That's my favorite moment, and it's going to be my favorite moment of the season. We saw it with Randall Cobb a few years ago when Rodgers absolutely crushed the Bears in his hand and knocked them out of the playoffs, and he's going to do it again this year. Packers are my lock.
I have the Buccaneers locked this week. They are most likely, I think they will make the playoffs this year. I haven't looked at the scenario exactly, but the Falcons are not good. I know they almost beat the Chiefs last week. But I think that a 7 points for the Bucs is a very easy pick for them.
So those are our locks for NFL Week 17. And again, interesting because Atlanta's a team that they're in sort of the middle where they're not bottoms of the league, but a loss helps their draft position. But for some reason, they like to play in close games. And I don't think have given up on the season, although it's been a tough one in Atlanta. Now upsets, which may even be harder in this week just because of the certain spreads. I'm going with what I'm rooting for more so than what I think. So I'm picking the Philadelphia Eagles tonight on Sunday Night Football. Might as well get points for something I'm going to root for and let it decide the Giants' future as well as my future in this big segment. Might as well. In seriousness, though, Jalen Hurts has impressed since he's became the Eagles starter. They have nothing to play for. Only team going into this week that's eliminated from the playoffs. But there's always that pride factor and wanting to, in Philly, beat the team and play spoiler when they're not a playoff team. And for the Eagles, you want Hurts to go out there and ball. You want to see his progression and his development because there's a quarterback controversy in Philly. Carson Wentz wants out. Is Jalen Hurts automatically their starter next season? I think there's some questions in Philadelphia, and that's not questioning Hurts' talent, just the limited time that the Eagles have got to see him in a starting role. This is another game in which he is the starter, and it's in a game that might not mean a lot for Philly, but is the season for the Washington football team. So if he comes out and plays well, it gives Philly a good indication of their 2021 season plans, and I'm hoping that him playing well also leads to an Eagles upset victory over Washington. Before we go into Brennan and Dan's thoughts, just the records. I'm 6-10, Brennan 5-11, and Dan 6-10 in terms of picking upsets. A little tough this year, but Brennan, who is your final upset pick of the year?
I would like to apologize before I say this, because I do consider myself, being from upstate New York, someone who appreciates Bills fans, even though I'm not a fan myself. I respect the hustle, but I'm going to pick the Dolphins as my upset of the week. It's only a 1.5 point game, and I think that if the Bills really had a lot to play for, then this would be a bigger spread. But they really don't. I mean, the Chiefs have already locked up the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Bills don't have a ton to play for. The Dolphins, on the other hand, have to play and win to get into the playoff. There's a scenario. It's 1 in 16 chance the Dolphins don't make the playoffs, but in that 1 in 16, they don't win the game. So I think that they have to win to get in. And with that being said, I think the Dolphins are going to come away with an upset, as much as it pains me to say that.
Yeah, I thought about that, but I can't not take the Bills. You know how I am. Right. But if they lose today, again, we're in. Whatever. Okay. I want to play at home, but again, it's okay. My upset this week, not necessarily by the process of elimination, because I think this will happen, but also because, I mean, these other games, I have a sense of humor, but I'm not going to take the Jets. So I took the Giants this week to win against the Cowboys. It's a 1.5 point spread in favor of the Cowboys. Again, the Giants need to win. I think they can, and I also love making fun of the Cowboys. So I do think that the Giants will get a win today.
Appreciate it, Dan. And those are upset picks for NFL Week 17. Now we'll rally off the rest of the games in an important Week 17. A lot of teams have something to play for today. Only a few that really don't matter. And they still matter in terms of draft position. That's what makes football great. We'll start with the 1 o'clock game, Cowboys versus Giants. You've gotten my thoughts, Dan's pick. I'm going with the Giants, of course. Brennan, being a bad guy, picking the Cowboys. And Dan is with the Giants as well, as he just mentioned. His upset pick. Look, the conditions are going to be bad. Maybe they really define the Giants' 2020 season, which has been a mess, but still a shot to make the playoffs. They need a win. This is a Cowboys team that has holes defensively, and even though they have firepower on the offense, are starting Andy Dalton and Ezekiel Elliott, who had a bounce-back week last week, but has not had a great season. It's all the keys for this game. Giants stopping Ezekiel Elliott and their front seven playing well, and the Giants not having a worldly offensive performance, but enough to get it done. And maybe the conditions help them, maybe they hurt them. Right now, the rain has subsided, but still could turn into snow depending on the temperature. Messy conditions, but those are our thoughts for Giants-Cowboys. Season on the line.
Next up, Falcons versus Bucks. Bucks are favored by 7. All three of us are taking the Buccaneers in this game, with Dan making it his lock of the week. I don't know. This game doesn't really matter, to be honest. Like, when you look at the playoff scenarios, and also like John mentioned, the draft picks, obviously, big deal. But, like, playoff-wise, doesn't really make a difference. Bucks are in, but they're not going to be the tops in the NFC, so it doesn't matter. Falcons are out, and they don't have any chance of making the playoffs at this point. So, again, doesn't really matter. All three of us have the Bucks, but neither team is really playing for much in this one. So I think the Bucks are going to be able to come out and win this game pretty handily, strictly due to the fact that I don't think the Falcons really care. Next game up, I have that one too. That's going to be Vikings versus Lions. Another game. Nothing really matters. Both teams already eliminated from playoff contention. No one has a chance to get in. So this is really all for a draft position. That being said, I think the Vikings are just a better team overall. And, of course, having the head coach that you started the season with obviously helps. So I think the Vikings are going to be able to take this one, and everyone else agrees Vikings all across the board.
For the next game, we have the Steelers and the Browns. Yes, we do. The Steelers are already in the playoffs, kids, but the Brownies need to win to get in as either the 5, the 6, or the 7 seed. By the way, if the Browns win, the Bills have the 2 seed guaranteed. So all three of us have the Browns today. They really do need it in order to get in. The next game is the Dolphins and the Bills. Bills are already in. If they win, they get the 2 seed, but the Dolphins also need to get in. Like we said, there are 16 scenarios for the Dolphins, and one of them doesn't have them making it. So they really need to win today. And by the way, that scenario is if the Dolphins lose or tie, the Browns win, the Ravens win, the Colts win, and the Titans win or tie, the Dolphins are out. So that's pretty specific. They should just win, not worry about it.
Yeah. Ravens versus Bengals. Ravens scenario's easy. Win and you're in. That's what they have to do. 14 points favorites against the Bengals. We have the Ravens across the board. Next up, Jets versus Patriots. Lol. Patriot game that doesn't matter for the first time in forever. And the Jets, maybe they get to 3-13. Hey, you might as well. You have the second pick locked up anyway. And Adam Gase probably thinks he's coaching for his job, which makes no sense. I'm picking the Jets because why not? So is Dan. Brennan with the Pats.
Packers versus Bears next up. Green Bay is going to win. I have it as my lock of the week. I'd love to see Bears fans be really upset. And I think that Aaron Rodgers is a man on one of the main networks likes to say, is a bad man. I think the Packers win this one pretty handily. I think they cover at 4. Everyone else agrees that they win. Don't know if they agree if they cover. Saints versus Panthers. This is a game that has a lot of implications as far as who gets the top seed in the NFC. Obviously, the Packers have to lose. They have control of that. If the Packers win, they get the number 1 seed in the NFC. They don't have to play in the first round, and they get to play at Lambeau, where they are pretty unbeatable. If the Packers lose and the Saints win, they get that number 1 seed. Another place that is very hard to play in is the Metrodome in New Orleans. So obviously, the number 1 seed in the NFC is important. Saints play the Panthers. They're favored by 6. All 3 of us have them winning. So if that plays out how all 3 of us have it playing out, the Packers will have the number 1 seed. The Saints will have the 2, and Lambeau becomes the place to play in the NFC.
Seahawks versus 49ers next. Seahawks trying again, as you mentioned, Brennan, the seeding. They want to keep stronghold of that 3rd seed. They play the 49ers, which don't have a lot to play for. Seahawks across the board in terms of our picks.
Charger versus Chiefs is next. Chiefs aren't going to play anybody. They have the number 1 seed locked up. It really doesn't matter for them. As far as the Chargers go, they're still going to play a lot of their guys. Justin Herbert is going to win NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I think that their offense is going to be able to come out and put up a bunch of points. They played them close at the beginning of the season, weren't able to win, but it was a good game. And all 3 of us have the Chargers in what is a surprise pick, I think. I feel like one of us probably should have picked the Chiefs, but hey, what are you going to do?
Cardinals versus Rams. We talked about game of the week. It's my lock 4-point play.
Titans and Texans. The Titans are a 92% chance to make the playoffs, so they're in, and the Texans are not. All 3 of us have the Titans. The Colts must win to get in. The Jaguars have to win to make us laugh. So all 3 of us have the Colts because they are a better team, and like we said, they have to win to get into the playoffs.
Hey, Jaguars last win, week 1 versus the Colts. Next up, Raiders versus Broncos. Raiders are favored by 2.5. Both these teams eliminated from the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter for anything. I think the Raiders are marginally better than the Broncos, and with that, I have picked the Raiders. Dan agrees with me. He's got the Raiders as well, but John went with the Broncos. I get it. Drew Lock, he's got some swagger, but he's just not good enough to actually win the game. So 2 versus 1 there. 2 Raiders, 1 Bronco. Next up, Washington versus Philly.
Sunday Night Football, Eagles, brotherly love, city of brotherly love. Show a brother, me, some love, win the game versus Washington. That's all I could say. I, of course, made it my upset because why not? And that does it for the MVP show for the first episode of 2021 here on January 3rd. We'll be with you every Sunday throughout January breaking down the NFL playoffs and next week giving you our prediction for the College Football National Championship as well. For Brennan Miller and Dan Passante, I'm John Vicari. This has been the MVP show.